Hello, it is Monday, September 16th, and the shortlist for this year's Booker Prize is going to be announced this evening. The award has kindly sent me the shortlist in advance, but I don't know what it is yet. What I've done instead is when I saw that email came through, I handed my computer over to my husband, and he copied down on these colorful envelopes the names of each of the books on the shortlist, so I can reveal them on camera, we can discover them together, and you can see my instant reaction to each book that is on the shortlist. And I'm so excited and eager to find out what is on the list after having read so many of these books. Now, after I reveal that, I'm going to go through each of the books and give brief summaries of them and any thoughts or feelings I have about all of these novels. And also on the Booker Prize website, they have extracts from each of the books. They have Q&As with each of the authors. They have a whole article about books that have inspired all these different authors and comments from the judges about all of these books. And I found all of this really useful and interesting to supplement my reading of all these books. And they've really broadened my reading experience. So I'd really suggest going over to the Booker Prize website. Now, just to remind you, these are the 13 long-listed novels for this year's prize. And I've currently read 10 and half of them. I'm currently reading Creation Lake with my online book club, and we just started discussing it yesterday, having a really interesting conversation about it because this is a very intriguing book. But as I last week, I made a shortlist prediction video, which are these 6 novels. These are the 6 novels that I'm sort of predicting, like mostly hoping rather than predicting, will be on this year's shortlist because I loved reading these books so much. Well, except for I haven't read Playground yet, but I'm anticipating it so much, and I've been kind of holding it in reserve because I'm so eager to get to it since I loved Richard Pryor's last novel, Bewilderment, so much, and I kind of wanted to wait until it was actually physically published to start reading it and discussing it with everyone else. I've not read Wandering Stars yet because I still need to get to reading There. So I want to read that before getting to Wandering Stars. And as I talked about, I gave up on reading Held because I really wasn't enjoying it. So I'm partly nervous that it's going to be on this year's shortlist. But without any further ado, let's go through and discover together what is on the shortlist. And honestly, I've not looked at these envelopes yet, and I'm going to do a shuffle just to make it completely random of discovering what is on the list first. Okay, so let's go with yellow first. So, what is the first novel on the shortlist? It is... The Safekeep by Yael van der Wouden. Oh, okay. I just read this with my online book club last month, and so have had lots and lots of discussion about this novel. Really fascinating and really engaging and fun book, as well as it got really emotional and interesting towards the end. So yes, I will talk more about this book. Okay, that's a surprise, but really great. And let's go with this blue one next. This is James by Percival Everett. Hooray! Yes. Such a brilliant novel. And yeah, was like me and everyone else have been really expecting that this would be listed this year. It's just made the National Book Award long list in America as well. So I always think it's a really good sign when a novel shows up on multiple prize lists. So that is fantastic. Okay, number 4. Let's go with this green envelope, and it is Orbital by Samantha Harvey. Okay, this has been a very divisive book, one that I was hoping would be on the shortlist because I loved reading it. I found it really meaningful and poignant, but I know not every reader has felt that way. So, okay, that is really interesting. And next, let's go with gray. And it is, yay, Stornyard Devotional by Charlotte Wood. I just read this very recently. Such a moving and meditative novel. So Yes, that is great to see. That has made the shortlist. Okay, two more. Let's go. Let's say pink for last. This light blue one, and it is Creation Lake by Rachel Kushner, the book I'm reading at the moment. And okay, yeah, this is. I think this has really divided some readers too. Like even within the book itself, because there's two very big different elements of the story. So okay. Oh my gosh. Okay. I think My Friends has to be the last one, at least the one that I'm really, really hoping will be on the short list. Oh, but it might be held instead. Okay, let's see. It is. Oh, no! It's held. I can't believe My Friends didn't make the short list. Oh my gosh. Okay. Held by Anne Michaels. Okay, this is really interesting, and I'm gonna have to get into more about my thoughts and feelings about this. I'm going through all of these different books. Let me just take a moment to catch my breath, and then I will get into it. Whew, that was exciting. Now, here are the 6 novels on the shortlist, so I'm gonna go through each of them. The first I'll talk about is Orbital by Samantha Harvey, because this is a very short novel, the shortest novel on the long list, and it is very spare in a lot of ways in its prose, as it depicts 6 astronauts that are in a spacecraft that is circling around our globe multiple times, and they are observing our world below them. So they have this very interesting perspective on it, but they're also reflecting about their personal past, about things that they're going through at the moment. And a number of these astronauts have dramas that they're currently embroiled with, whether to do with grief or health issues, but also observing issues ongoing on the planet. Like there's a giant hurricane occurring in the South Seas that they're following, and so we follow them on this map as they are traveling around. And so they have a very different perspective on our planet. They have a very different perspective of time itself, being kind of outside of our planet and following the rotation of the sun in a very different way from what we experience here on the ground. And so we follow them in all of these observations, a lot of which are very poetic in their nature, as they're observing our planet. But then we also follow these interesting little tidbits of character details. It doesn't get too much into their lives and doesn't have a sort of overarching plot to the entire book. It's much more a very thoughtful and reflective book in that way, and that will work for some readers, and I know it really hasn't worked for other readers, but for me personally, I found it really effective and meaningful, partly because I just have a fascination with space and getting this kind of different perspective on our planet. And so yeah, I found this a wonderful reading experience. The Safekeep by Yael van der Wouden. It's a very gripping story, but also looking at history in a really dynamic and interesting way. So it primarily follows a character named Isabel in the 1960s who lives on her own in the family home in a Dutch province. And she has a very self-contained existence and doesn't really like having exchanges with other individuals. But she has 2 brothers, and one day her brother introduces her and her other brother to his new girlfriend, and he says that he is going away for work and he wants his girlfriend Ava to stay with Isabel in the family home. But so Isabel really doesn't like this idea. Ava is a very talkative and vivacious individual, but Isabel really doesn't react very well to that. And so that is the initial incident that sort of sets off the drama of this story. And then we follow a number of twists and turns in the story as these 2 individuals are in this house together, and the very tense exchanges between them and finding out what happens, and secrets secrets about both of their pasts, and we follow them as they form a connection with each other. And so there are lots of great surprises in this. It's a very thrilling book, as opposed to Orbital, which in a different way is like, a very much more meditative kind of book. This is a really gripping story, but also I think my favorite part was the final part of the book. It's in 3 very different distinct sections, and the third section I found to be the most engaging and moving, because we find out more about the characters' lives, but we also get so much more about the history, and a really different way of looking at post-World War II history and what was going on for individuals, and the plight of different individuals after the Second World War. So this is a really wonderful read that also gets into queerness and history, and from such a fascinating angle. Even though I know this is very superficial, I have to mention again just how beautiful the inside cover of the UK hardback of this novel is. Creation Lake by Rachel Kushner, and this is a really interesting novel to discuss, especially since I've just started reading it, and I felt like I had a slight misstep, because it's partly marketed as a kind of thriller spy novel, or a new twist on the spy novel, when really it's not so much about that, but at the same time it is really about that, because it follows a woman who calls herself Sadie, who's American, and she travels to an eco-commune in France undercover to spy upon their activities, to see if they've been involved with any eco-terrorism or planning on conducting any eco-terrorism, and so pretends to be someone that she is not. Now, there have been a number of real cases about this in the past, both in Britain and America, ones I know about, and some really famous and notorious cases of people that government agents who have pretended to be someone they're not, to go undercover in an organization, and have sometimes formed relationships with other people in that organization, and married them and had children with them, and so lived for many years under this assumed identity, when then it was eventually discovered and uncovered that they were actually an agent all along. And so you can imagine the sense of betrayal that this has for individuals, and also how manipulative and dodgy this is. So yeah, there have been a number of real life cases about that, but and so it does follow her, and as this very steely individual who kind of believes that she's a super sleuth, but actually it's kind of comical how it follows how she isn't actually doesn't seem to be all that good at her job. At least when she goes to France, she drinks a lot of wine, gets a bit drunk, and then gets lost driving around the countryside, and I found that very funny. And so I think Rachel Kushner is kind of poking fun at this this kind of like steely individual who just believes that she's justified in her actions and going undercover like this, because she is employed by corporations that are making her do this, and or that she actively engages in doing. But it is much more about, because part of her spy work is reading emails from a kind of mentor of this community, who's continuously writing to them, meditating a lot about the evolution of the human species and civilization in general, and especially how many thousands of years ago Neanderthals some mated with Homo sapiens, and how the current day humans, we have small elements of Neanderthal in our genetic makeup. And so he's meditating a lot about this, and his messages that are more like essays are reproduced in this novel as she is reading them, and to try to see if there's any information she can glean about the community and their activities from it. So it's much more concentrating on that, and a bulk of the narrative is made up of that, of these very like meditative thoughts about science. Now, I'm about halfway through reading the novel, and I'm really interested to see where it's going to go, if it's going to focus much more on this kind of meditative side of the story, or if it's going to get into the thrilling aspect of, will she be discovered as an undercover agent, or will she infiltrate this commune and report on their activities, or even set them up to be arrested or suspected of different criminal activities. So there's interesting tension going on in this this book, but not the tension that I was expecting. And so I know, again, that will work for some readers and probably not work for other readers. But we're having lots of really interesting discussions about it. There's also lots of references to Joan Crawford in this, which I wasn't expecting at all. So yeah, it's a very like quirky and intriguing book, and I'm very interested to see where it's going to go next. Held by Anne Michaels. Now, I made a whole separate video of talking about this book and why I gave up on reading it. I think I read about 70 pages into it, even though I felt like it had a lot of potential, like initially, as it follows in the very beginning, a soldier who is wounded in war, and so kind of feels the precariousness of his life in such a profound way. And then we follow him as he travels back to the woman he loves and his profession as a photographer, and in some of the photographs that he takes, you can see kind of like ghost images of people that are not there. So it's really meditating on our mortality and the line between life and death, and the present and the past, and how much the past is still so much a part of our present day. But it travels forward, leaps forward in time, and follows a number of different individuals. And where I got really like hung up on this book is how, because it's written in very poetic prose, and there are very like short sections of it where it will just meditate on a different like matter, philosophical issue, and those are kind of connected with the story, but are like pondering much bigger things about life. And I just found them slightly too abstract, and the language that is used in this, since Anne Michaels is a poet, has published a number of poetry collections, and this is her third novel, that there's more emphasis on the language and the sound of that language, rather than it adding to the story and the development of the characters. I mean, it does fit in with the story that she is creating, but I felt like those choices in the way she is writing it, that it is just leaning on that much more. But overall, I was just finding this like a bit of a slog to read, and also couldn't really grasp or hold on to either any of the characters or story or the concepts that it was discussing. Like I would read a section of it, and then the next day I couldn't recall at all what had happened. I know a number of readers have had that experience, but I also know a lot of readers who have read this found it really profound and meaningful, and have been hoping that it'll be on the shortlist. So a very divisive, kind of Marmite book, and yes, I do want to go back and try to read this again, because if you followed my experience of reading the Booker Prize last year, there was the novel Study for Obedience last year, which I'd also given up on reading during the long list period, and then went back to and did find it really engaging, and got a lot more from the book. So it might just be one of those books that it takes multiple reading experiences to really appreciate it. So maybe I'll have that with this again. I will go back to reading it and read some more supplementary material about it on the Booker Prize website and other readers' responses to it, to really like think through whether I agree with those things, or I might read it again and then just disagree and say, well, I have a different opinion. And that's really the whole joy of book prizes, of having these like interesting and in-depth discussions about books that we probably wouldn't normally have on just, books that are published and being discussed. So yeah, it gives an opportunity for much more in-depth coverage like this. Stone Yard Devotional by Charlotte Wood. This is an Australian novel, and it's great to see an Australian novel on the shortlist of the Booker. But it's another book on the list that I would say it's much more thoughtful novel, really about the issues that it's exploring, rather than having a thrilling plot in any way, though there are plot elements to it that I found really poignant as it follows a woman who has left her home and her job and her husband to live in or alongside a religious community. She's not religious herself, but has just moved here to live a very stripped down and simplified existence because she was engaged in a job with animal conservation and was a strong activist and had known a number of activists before this, but has kind of given into despair and feeling like overwhelmed by all of the enormous issues of the world and how much effect she can actually have upon them, which I'm sure many of us like feel the same way. So I found her incredibly sympathetic in this way, and we follow her wry observations about this community and reflecting upon her past and a lot of these bigger issues in the world, and there are a number of elements of the story, like a nun who has died, her body has been returned to this community to be buried, and there's a whole drama and issue around that. There's also another nun in this community who's kind of a star figure, an activist, but a number of the members of the community are quite critical of her, and this kind of star nun is one that the narrator she knew in her youth and knew about this nun's tragic backstory, and it's really fascinating following her. But also this community is undergoing a kind of like attack by mice. It's their homes and the landscape is being completely overrun by mice, and I've been told by some readers, some Australians, that this is a natural thing that occurs from time to time, and these mice are a real physical problem that she and members of the community are battling with, but also they are kind of like metaphor for both the memories of her past, which keep rising up like almost unbidden in her thoughts and that she has to ponder, but they're also a reminder of her mortality and death, and no matter how much we do in our lives and how like good an existence we try to live, we all come to the same end, and the nun's body being returned to this community is a reminder of that as well. So it's really fascinating. There are so many elements of her backstory, and compares, she's kind of mourning her mother, even though her mother died a long time ago. She finds that, grief is something you never really get over, and she's thinking about her mother's example of things that her mother did in her life, but how her mother was also prone to this desire to escape. And I keep thinking about this moment where she recalls about how her mother, when she would go out to do gardening, the mother said, well, I'm disappearing. And so there's this tension in our lives where, we want to be engaged with larger civilization in our communities and people that we love, but we also have this kind of desire to escape. And I found that incredibly poignant following as she contemplates all these bigger issues. And so I think this is a very powerful novel and a really strong contender for the prize. And there is James by Percival Everett, which is such a masterpiece as it takes the story of The Adventures of Huckleberry Finn by Mark Twain and tells it from the point of view of the character of Jim. And I know some readers who haven't read Mark Twain's novel but then read this felt like they were missing out on some elements of it. So I would suggest, if you haven't read Huckleberry Finn recently or ever at all, I would suggest getting to it, or at least listening to it on audiobook before reading this novel, or you could just read like a summary of the main events in Huckleberry Finn and the issues it explores, because Everett gives such a clever take on it, since through a lot of that novel, Jim or through parts of that original novel by Twain, Jim isn't actually with Huckleberry Finn. So Everett fills in the time of what happens and occurs and what Jim experiences outside of that time. And this novel uses Everett's special kind of like trademark satirical tone to look at issues to do with race and human relationships and communities in America. But he used it to such an emotional effect in this book as he explores the inner life of Jim and how he wants to assert himself as an individual separate from the slavery that he was born into, but then following also the relationship that he develops with Huckleberry Finn as they go on this journey down the Mississippi River. And this is another novel like Orbital that has a map on the inside cover, and someone commented that maps in the inside covers of the book seems to be a real theme on this year's Booker Prize, and it is. And so it's a really great like adventure story and really engaging, following his different experiences, some of which are more comical and some of which are really tragic and heartrending. And so yeah, this is such an engaging novel to read, and so clever and thoughtful how it meditates upon all of these issues and James's experience as he wants to like assert his own identity and wants to read. His desire to read and engage with literature and to write himself and to tell his own story is so powerfully conveyed in this book that I think it's an incredible achievement and such a great novel. So that is the shortlist, the 6 novels that are up for this year's award. Some books that I was hoping and expecting to see on the shortlist, and others which are surprises, but a really great group of books overall, especially because these novels are going to continue to inspire so many great discussions about what the novels are doing and the subject matters they explore and the way the authors approach narrative and the various readers' responses to all of these books. So there'll be so much great chat to come about all of these books in the lead up to the winner being announced on November 12th. So I'll be really keen to hear what you think about this shortlist, about any of these books individually, and what books are you looking forward to reading or rereading, because a really important thing is that the judges of this prize read all of the books on the list at least 3 times in the lead up to the winner. So they are very familiar with the stories, and especially upon a rereading of a book, I think you can see it like highlights things about the book that you might have missed early on, or can develop like as you read the book overall and have familiarity with it, or it might emphasize some aspects of the book that don't work as well when you return to it multiple times. And so yeah, I'm so intrigued to hear what the judges have been discussing. You know, imagine being on a fly on the wall in the judges' discussion about all of these books. But yeah, going to be a lot of great discussion about it, but it also like highly recommend reading these books from the long list in particular if you haven't read them already, because yeah, these were great reading experiences for me personally, but again, I know people have had different reactions to all of these books, and that's just part of the pleasure of the reading prize. So let me know what you think in the comments below, and I'm looking forward to more great discussion about all of these books. But I hope you're doing well and have a good day, and I will speak to you again soon. Bye-bye.